Hi guys, welcome to Kuku Animations. In today's video, we are going to be covering the topic of making your first 2D animation using the software Blender greasepencil. Now, if you're new to this software, I want to assure you that by the end of this tutorial, you should be able to start making 2D animations in no time. Now, if you don't have the Blender software already installed on your PC, you could head over to your Chrome browser and just by typing blender.org, this should directly take you to the Blender homepage. Now over there, you can see a big download button, and by clicking on that, you should have Blender already downloaded on your PC. Now when you have Blender downloaded, follow the due procedures and then just install that into your PC. When you have that installed, you can then open up the app, and by opening it, you should be greeted with a welcome screen like this. So over here, you can see a splash screen that I have the two ways to navigate into your 2D animation. You could either click over here on the splash screen, or if for some reason your splash screen doesn't show up, you could come over here to File, go to New, and then click on 2D animation. And that should directly take you to the 2D animation scene here on Blender. Okay. So now we have this loaded up. This here is a custom 2D animation scene, but I think this is what you should have on your PC. So I'm just going to go to default and load factory settings. I think this is what you have on your scene. Now what I'm going to do about this is I'm going to change the color of our background. So I'm just going to come over here, just go to color and just drag this down to about this point. Okay, I think this color isn't too bad. Now, if you want the spec for this, it's BDC37 and then FFF, that's triple F at the end. Okay, so if you have that spec, let's continue on this tutorial. Now, there are two ways of navigation around the 2D scene here on Blender greasepencil. You could either navigate using your mouse or using a drawing tablet. Now, if you have both, that is best. And if you don't have a tablet, you can also use a stylus pen if your PC is touchscreen. So that also works well. Now, with those said, let's know how to navigate. So I'm using a mouse first. So by scrolling my middle mouse button backwards, we can zoom out. And by scrolling my middle mouse button forward, we can zoom in. By holding down Shift key and holding down my middle mouse button, I can pan around the screen. Now, by holding just my middle mouse button, I can move around the screen like this and just see the 3D viewport of Blender greasepencil. Okay, now if you are in the 3D viewport and you want to go back to the 2D scene, by coming over here where it shows this camera icon, by clicking on this, you should go back to the 2D scene of Blender. Now, there are some shortcuts for this, but before we do that, let me just show you how to work with the tablet. Now, if you have a tablet and it has two buttons, you could set the first button to be your middle mouse button and maybe the back one to be your right mouse button. But I prefer to set one of my button as an extrude key, that is E, because that actually helps my workflow when making animations. But you can use what works best for you. So if for some reason your tablet doesn't come with a button, you could come over here to edit and just hit on preferences. So I'm going to go to key map, input, let's see. Okay, where it says mouse, I'm going to click on emulate tree button mouse. Now what this does is this allows me to pan around feature on my tablet. If my tablet doesn't have a button, I'm just going to exit that because I think there's default autosave to this. So I'm just going to exit that. Now if I hold down my Alt key and I move my pen around the tablet, you can see I am panning around the screen just like that. So I'm going to hit 0 to go back to the camera view. But it might not work right now because we do not have a numpad on my PC. So what I'm going to do in order to be able to use 0 to go back to the camera view is I'm going to come here to edit, click on preferences, and I'm going to select emulate numpad. Now if I hit 0, this should take me to the camera view. If I hit 7, this should take me to the top view and like that. Now I'm also going to put in another setting that is very crucial to having a better workflow in your 2D animation scene. So I'm going to come over here where it says key map, and I'm going to change the spacebar to bring up a tool menu, and I'm going to change the tab to bring up a pie menu. Now all these preferences have autosave, so I'm just going to exit that. Now if I hit 0, this takes me to the camera view or the 2D scene, and if I hold down spacebar, you can see the tool menu over here. And then if I hit on tab, you can see the pie menu here as well. So this just improves your workflow on Blender. Now with all of this said, let's get started. So over here you can see we are on draw mode. Now draw mode is the only mode which allows you to be able to draw strokes on Blender. Now if we come over here, you can see the brushes, the various brushes we have or tools we have in Blender. So you could just choose the one you want, and you can also see them here as well as displayed. So this is one of the feature added to Blender 4.3. So by taking this down, let's say you don't want this, you could just drag it in, and then if you want it, you could just drag it out again. Or you could come over here in object mode, go to view and just hide the assets shelf. But I think it's actually best for it to be out. So let's just go back to draw mode and you can see it here. Now the next thing I want to show you is let's draw a stroke on the screen. So I'm just going to draw some strokes on the screen. Now let me just zoom in so you can see what we are seeing here. Now if you look very closely, you can clearly see that the stroke actually varies in size and opacity. And now this is because pressure sensitivity is on, and I am using a tablet right now. Now if you don't have a tablet and you're using a mouse, you cannot use pressure sensitivity. So that is something that you should take note of. I'm going to come over here, and you can see over here it says radius, and these are the pressure sensitivity icons over here. And over here it says strength. Now what radius means is that by drawing on the canvas when pressure sensitivity is on, the harder you press, that is the bigger your lines are going to be. Now the less I press, that is the thinner my lines are going to be. So that is what the pressure sensitivity is. So what this basically means is just that the radius refers to your size of strokes, okay, and then the strength refers to the opacity of your strokes. So with pressure sensitivity on, the harder I press, that's the darker it's going to be. And then the lesser I press, that's the brighter, or let's just say that's the more transparent it becomes, okay. Now all of these are just the basic things you should know in draw mode. We could then come over here, you can see the caps type. You could either choose a rounded cap or a flat cap. This just means how you want the end of your strokes to be actually. Now over here we have the erase tool. The erase tool, just like every other software, allows you to erase out unwanted parts of your strokes. Now apart from this, you can also use the point eraser. Now what this means is the points just erases your strokes point by point, so you can just clearly see how it's eating it up point by point. Now over here we have the stroke, and the stroke just takes a whole chunk, that's a whole stroke out of the scene just by that. So basically that is what it does. So the fill tool, we're going to come back to that. And over here we have the geometry tools. Now in order to see the geometry tools, by hovering your mouse around here and just holding your left mouse button down, you can see a drop down menu which has the box, the circle, the line, the polyline, arc, and curve. So you can just use them and just see which one works best for you. Now with all of this, let's just head over to our edit mode. Now in the edit mode here, we can just select our strokes, like I've selected this one. Now if I hit S, I can scale this stroke up. If I hit R, I could rotate this, and then if I hit G, I could just move this. So you can just take this as R for rotate, G for grab, and then S for scale. And then over here, you can also see move. So this just basically does what the G key, the S key, and the R key does. So this is rotate, This here is the scale, and then this here is the transform. That's just basically the 3-in-1 of rotate, scale, and the grab. So you can just test out which one works best for you here as well. Now let's go over to our sculpt mode. Now the sculpt mode allows us to just mess with the topology of our object more freely than it does in the object mode. Now over here, I'm going to go to the stroke selection, and I'm going to just use the smooth tool. This is the smooth tool selected. I'm going to just move this around, and now you can see this is just making our strokes a lot more smoother. So you can clearly see this. So there was something I missed out in the edit mode, and I'm going to just tell you that right now. Now in the edit mode, we have different types of selection. Now the first type of selection is the point selection. That's over here. You can change your selections. Now the point selections just allows you to take your selections point by point like that and just move them around, while the stroke selection allows us to move a whole stroke at once. So basically that is what it does. I'm going to hit X and just delete that out of the scene. Now let's just zoom out and let's go back to our draw mode. So before we continue this, I'm just going to delete this object here. And with that object deleted, I'm going to select the collections panel, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to add in a grease pencil object. Let's add in an empty, and now you can clearly see a grease pencil object has been added to our collections over here. And then if you look down here, you can see a layer was also added right here. Now if I come here and I hit backspace, I'm going to just rename this to ball because we want to make a bouncing ball animation in this tutorial. Now you can clearly see the layer is also here. So what we can call a grease pencil object is just basically a group of layers, because if I come here and just bring down these drop down menus, you can see the layer over here. Now I could just rename the layer to lines, and you can clearly see it is changed over here. So I'm just going to hover my mouse around here and just drag the timeline up so we can see this. So this part, in other softwares, this is called a timeline. Well, you see, Blender, unlike other software, uses grease pencil for its 2D animation. Now 2D grease pencil only works with the help of a dope sheet. So this is called a dope sheet in Blender. And then we also have a timeline over here. Now the timeline works with the object mode, but we are not going to be doing that in this tutorial. So you can clearly see here the dope sheet over here. So I'm going to select this. Now you can see this blue thing I'm moving all around. Now this is called a playhead, and then these diamonds over here, they are called keyframes. So wherever the playhead is, that is the current frame of animation you are on. So right now we are on frame 20, and then the keyframes are on frame 1. I'm going to come over here to where it says end, and I'm going to hit backspace, and I'm going to end this at frame 20 because 250 is actually too much for a bouncing ball animation. Now I'm going to hold down my middle mouse button just to drag the dope sheet to the center. Now you notice that dope sheet is a bit too small. You can't actually see what you have in here. You can then zoom in on the timeline, on dope sheet timeline. So I'm just going to scroll my middle mouse button forward, and we can zoom in here on the dope sheet like this. And it's as easy as this. Okay, so this fits very nicely. Now I'm going to add in another layer. So I'm going to hit plus, and then I'm going to name this layer fills. I'm going to hit add. Now the fills layer is above the lines layer, and this is wrong. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come over here and just tap this down, and that just takes the fills below the lines. Now we want to be working on the lines layer, so I'm going to select the lines layer. I'm going to come over here. Now when we added the fills layer, a keyframe was actually added to the fills layer, and now we do not want this. So I'm just going to select all of this and hit X and delete this. But if I delete this, the fills layer is going to go. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hit G and just move that to about this point to be merged with frame 1 over here. Now over here we have auto keyframing. So what this does is this just allows us to have keyframes automatically added without us manually putting them in there. So I'm just going to zoom in and let's get animating. So let's go to our draw mode because that's the only mode which allows us to draw things. So I'm going to select the ball icon, that's the circle over here. I'm going to draw a circle like this. Let's just draw a circle like this. Now, the circle, we are using a pencil, but I think I want to use a pen. So I'm just going to undo this by hitting my right mouse button to undo. And I'm going to come over here to where it says ink pen. And I'm going to reduce the radius of this to like 3. Okay. I'm going to reduce the radius to like 3. And then I am going to draw my circle again. Now, when you draw your circle, you notice that there are these 2 lines over here. Now, these lines actually help you to adjust your strokes. And then, since this size might not be okay, maybe it's not rounded, enough, you can just adjust that a bit. And when you're done, by hitting enter key, you should have your circle created into the scene. Okay. So with our circle added into the scene, I'm going to just zoom out. Let's see what we are doing. I'm going to come over here to frame 2. And I'm going to draw another circle. Now we have auto keyframing on, so we do not need to add in keyframes, because if I just draw on frame 2, the keyframes will automatically be added like this. So now what you notice is that when I drew this, extra frames were added over here. And as these extra frames were added, the previous frame became green. Now this is because of the onion skinning in Blender. Now if you do not want onion skinning, you could just come over here and disable this. But it's better to just keep it on. And if I go to frame 1, you can see the color of the frame above us is blue. So the green one stands for the one before and the blue one is for the one to come. So basically that's just what the onion skinning does in Blender. I'm going to come over here to frame 3 and I'm going to draw a circle again like this. And I'm going to just do the same till the ball drops on the floor. So right now we have the ball dropping to the floor. Now let's just hit this play over here and let's see how that is. Now you can see the animation, the ball just comes down and it's not too bad, but it's actually okay. Now I'm just going to show you how to animate more easier instead of having to draw every frame and every time. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to pause this. I'm just going to delete these frames all the way from frame 2. I'm just going to hit X and I'm going to delete those keyframes. I'm going to come over here to frame 2, go over to edit mode, make sure auto keyframing is on, and I'm going to do G along the Z axis and just take this frame down. Now as I took this frame down, you can see some keyframes were added on frame 2. Now I can come over here to frame 3 and do G along the Z and just bring this down as well. Now I can hit S along the Z axis and just scale this up. I'm going to hit S along the X axis and just take this in as well. I'm going to do G along the Z axis and just bring this down to about this point. Now if you look closely, you can see that the size of the lines of our stroke is actually thinner. You can make this become bigger by holding down Alt and S and then just dragging your mouse away to add the size and dragging your mouse closer to reduce the size. So basically that's what that does. I'm going to come over here to frame 4 and we could actually duplicate frames rather than trying to edit frame 3. So I'm going to come over here and select frame 2. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate and then move this to frame 4. I'm then going to do G along the Z axis and just bring this down to about this point over here. Now when we have this frame around this point, I'm going to go over here to frame 5. I'm going to do G along the Z and just bring another one down as well. Then at frame 6, we should have a squash and stretch principle over here. Now what this means is that objects aren't that rigid, and if you should throw a ball with so much force on the floor, the ball is actually going to squash out before it stretches back or goes back to its normal shape. So basically, let's just play this so you can see what I mean by this. Now you can see how the ball drops very nicely. Now I'm going to pause this animation, and now the ball drops. Now I want the ball to bounce back up. We could either go back and then start drawing in some frames, but the easier way to do this, let's just go over to frame 8. I'm going to hit A to select every keyframe over here, and I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate, and I'm going to move them away from the previous frames. Now I'm going to take the playhead to frame 14. That's on the first frame over here. I'm going to hit S. I'm going to type in -1, and that is going to give us a flip. And now this just gives us the inverse rather than having to draw our frames over and over again. Now if we play this, you can see the way the ball goes up and down like this. Now what I'm going to do is, since we have these two frames the same, I'm just going to delete out these ones, and I'm going to select these ones over here, G, and then just move them to frame 8. And then I'm going to come over here to the end frame and just change this to end at frame 12. Sorry. And now if I play this animation, you can see it is very fast. Now if we want to give this ball more airtime, what we can do is we can actually give it a little bit more space over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the end frame to, let's say, 15. And now if we play this, this should give us more airtime. And if we want to add in more ground time, I'm just going to do G and just move this away. And now you can see there is more ground time. If you want more ground time and less airtime, I could move this farther away. And now you can see how this looks. But I think it's best with more airtime, like this. Okay. So basically, this is a simple bouncing ball animation that I have made here on Blender. Now, to make this animation even look better, we are going to add in color to this animation. So that is where the fills layer comes in. I'm going to pause this animation, and I'm going to go back to frame 1. Now, I'm going to select the fills layer over here, and I'm going to go to draw mode. Now, I haven't showed you guys the shortcut. Let's say I hit tab. You can see the pie menu. I can use this to go to sculpt mode. I can use to go to edit mode. I can use to go to draw mode. So basically that is what that does. Now, here I am in the draw mode. I'm going to come over here where it says materials, and I'm going to click on this material. Now, the only material we have added is the strokes. So basically materials are just like colors, but they give us more ability to actually work or edit on them than other softwares. So now we only have the stroke material added to the bouncing ball. So if I come here and click this plus icon over here, and make sure you are on the fills layer. Now, when I click on that and I come over here, we've created a material, but Blender isn't sure. So you have to come over here and click on new. And now that has automatically created a material for you. Now, this gives you an option of having the materials to either have a stroke or a fill, or you can also have both. But we want a fill, so I'm just going to select this and then deselect this one. Now for the ball, we can give the ball a red color. Let's just look for something red. I'm going to go with something like this. Let's go for something very red. So we want it shiny, so I'm just going to take this higher and let's just place this around this point. Very nice. Now this is where the fill tool comes in. I'm just going to go and select the fill tool, and I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to just tap anywhere into the circle, and you can see that has filled this in. Now you can either fill like this, I'm just going to undo this, or you could use the pen tool, the pen tool here to fill this manually, but that might take a lot of time. Just by drawing around this, you can clearly see how I'm trying to fill this in like this and just like that. So let's just, okay. Now this isn't working very well because we have pressure sensitivity on. Now let's just test that again. So I'm just going to try to draw the circle like this, and you can clearly see the circle is being filled manually, but this might take a lot of time. So a lot of people don't actually use this like that. So I'm just going to undo this. and let's stick with the paint bucket tool. So I'm just going to double tap and then fill this in. Now that we have this filled in, I'm going to come over here to frame 2, tap again and just fill this in. Come over here to frame 3 and then double tap and then just add in colors for the remaining frames here as well. Now, I would have used the multi-frame option, but somehow it doesn't work like it's used to in the previous version of Blender. We actually had an inverse fill, something like that. Okay, so whenever I try to use the multi-frame, it just works somehow over here. But this is the multi-frame, so I'm going to show you how to use that in my next tutorial, hopefully. Okay, so we just manually filled all these frames, and now let's just play this. Now you can see how smooth this looks and our ball looks better. Now in order to make this look more attractive, we are going to add a shadow to this. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to click on the add, and I'm going to add a shadow layer. Let's just name that shadow. Okay, I'm going to add that layer. Now the shadow is okay beneath the lines layer. I'm going to select the shadow keyframe, and I'm going to just grab that and then move the shadow keyframe to frame 1. I'm going to move the playhead back to frame 1. Now, we are going to add a shadow to this ball. So what I want to do right now is I'm going to come over here and just remove the overlay so we can't actually see any onion skinning again. Then I'm going to come over here where it says blend. You can then come over here and then toggle on masks, and I'm going to come here and I'm going to click the drop down menu over here. And if you click this plus icon, you can add in the layers you want the masks to affect. And before we add in the mask, so the mask is for the shadow. So before we add in the mask, I'm going to come here and just add in a color, a new material. Now I'm going to add in this material and I'm going to give it a black color. Let me just undo this. Let me just remove this. Okay. I'm going to rename this material. Let's rename this to shade. And we didn't even name the previous one, so I'm just going to rename this to ball color. Okay. I'm going to select shade. And I'm going to make sure I am on the shadow layer. So now if I select my pen tool and then I draw on the ball, you can clearly see that I can exceed the ball without this having to affect the color of this. And now this might not look like the real color we should get from this. So what we can do is just to come over here and reduce the opacity of this. So I'm just going to reduce the opacity, and now you see this somehow gives us the color of a shade for the ball. So we can also just add, I'm just going to undo this. We can then come here and then just drag this back, and let's just stick with this. It's actually okay like this. And then you can come over to frame 2 and then just go to the edit mode. Let's just lock the fills layer and then lock the lines layer as well. Then we can then edit this part of the stroke, this shadow we just added. But let's bring back the overlay so we can see what we're doing. So I'm going to hit G and just try to adjust that. And keeping in mind how the previous frames look. So I'm just going to be doing that. And it's as easy as this. And now you can see on this frame, we need to drag this up. So an easier way to do this is to go to the sculpt mode. We're going to use the pull tool. And I am going to pull this up. Okay, so we have successfully put the shadows for the first set of frames, and we're going to do the same thing we did for this one. So I'm just going to select all the keyframes for the shadow, hit Shift D and just duplicate that to about this point over here. Then I'm going to come here, move my playhead here and just hit S-1 and that should flip that horizontally. Okay. Now with this flipped, I can then move it in place like this. Then I'm just gonna delete out this first frame and now this animation should be complete. So let's just see this. So I'm gonna go to draw mode and now you can see how this looks. Very nice. Now if you do not like the color of the ball, you could then still change the color of your ball by coming over here and then just changing the color to whatever color you want your ball to be. So sometimes this might lag. So what we can do right now to avoid the lagging is I'm just going to pause the animation first. So with the animation paused, I can then come over here and just change the color easily without it lagging. So let's just use the blue. And now the best part of the materials is that this affects every color in the frame, every color of the animation. So that's just the best part of this. So you can clearly see how this looks, and this looks very nice. Very nice. Now with this ball animation done, if you want to export the ball animation, it's also very easy. So the way we can export this ball animation is by coming over here to the render settings. Sorry, the output properties, right? Now we come over here and then the resolution is set. So if you want to make this smaller, let's just have something that we could post on TikTok. So I'm just gonna say 1080 by 1920 here. And now you can see we've just changed the size of our canvas, and then we could come here and change the frame rate, but 24 frames per second is actually very good. So I'm going to come over here to where it says file format, and we're going to change this to an FFmpeg video. I'm going to then scroll down and I'm going to come over here to where it says color management. Let's see. Nothing actually to change there. We'll go to where it says encoding. This was what I was looking for. Now we change this from Matroska to an MPEG 4 because this is just like the extension of the video. And then if you have audio, you can also add the audio, but we don't have an audio, so we're just going to stick with no audio over here. I'm going to scroll back up and then I'm going to choose the directory for my file to be saved. So I'm going to come to where it says desktop and I'm going to save this under images, I think. Yeah, I'm just going to save this under images and I'm going to accept that. Now with this saved under the images, I think these are all the settings I should do, but the remaining settings are fine to be okay like that. And now I can then come over here to where it says render. I can then say render animation over here. So now that this has been rendered, I'm just going to exit Blender and I'm going to then close this. And then I'm going to come over here to where I saved that under images. And I'm going to click on this. And now we can clearly see our ball bouncing animation in about now. Okay. It's taking a little bit of time. Okay. So if I click play, you can see we have this in a video. So basically this was what we had, and it's a very short animation and very nice animation. So basically this is how you can start animating on Blender Grease Pencil. So if you like the tutorial, consider giving me a like, consider sharing the video, and then also if you haven't subscribed to the channel, do subscribe to the channel as I will be dropping more interesting videos like this on my YouTube channel. So thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.